from situations and also sort of frame it to be able to decide what approach you want to use. And that my KPMG experience really, really helped with that. And then before KPMG, I'd worked in 2 other leading nonprofit organizations, so to speak. So that's really the summary of my experience. For the next 18 minutes thereabouts, I am going to speak on I'll talk about our work at Faith Foundation. And then I'll talk about, so in talking about our work, I'll talk about our mission, I'll talk about our theory of change, and I'll talk about our impact focus areas. My apologies, there's some noise that just came up by my street. So then after I talk about our work briefly, I'll then segue to just a very high level schematic that sort of described the way we operated pre-COVID. And then now moving to how that has changed over the last 12 months and sort of our own key learnings. Again, we're still in this process, so we're still learning. So I'll share some of our own key learnings in this process and along the way. So Faith Foundation is a 20-year-old organization. We celebrated our 20th year last year. So we're actually we're going to be 21 by the end of this month. And our mission has been the same since when we were founded, which was to focus on ensuring and promoting entrepreneurial development. So we really were the first nonprofit in Nigeria to focus on entrepreneurship support, training, and development across board. And the idea when we started, we were founded by a gentleman called Fola Adiola, who is the founder of GT Bank. And when we started, the focus really for Faith, and which really still remains to date, is to create and to make entrepreneurship a compelling alternative to employability, particularly for young people. And when we started, it was really just getting young people to start their businesses. So just transition ideas or very, very early stage businesses and building structures around that. But we've then since evolved because we have a very strong growth support framework that we initiated in 2001. And so what that meant was that even when people went through our programs, the growth support that continued allowed us to evolve to continue to support the program. So while we still take in largely young entrepreneurs, a lot of our entrepreneurs will still benefit from our support structure, our business advisory services, are now older businesses. So somebody that came to Faith at maybe 25 years old now is now 45 or 50, has a 20-plus-year-old business, and we've evolved to supporting that. So when the way our programs are structured are for startups, growing businesses, and high growth potential businesses. About 6 years ago, we also started doing a lot of work around policy advocacy. And so our enable component really looks at research, policy dialogue, thought leadership, and engaging with a lot of people in the ecosystem around that. So to date, we have about 12 research reports on the entrepreneurship ecosystem, in Nigeria, and micro, small, and medium enterprises. And each of the reports looks at different things from policy, ecosystem mapping, and so many other things like that. And then just very briefly, in terms of our theory of change really looks at, so again, it starts from how we started, young people in an environment where you have high unemployment and underemployment, and ensuring that we provide support in enabling them to build their businesses. There's also a lot of focus for us around growth support. So it's not just saying people should start businesses, but we want there to be growth support. So our impact indicators look around growth support and all of that. Our interventions are very similar with a lot of other organizations here, including enabling the ecosystem with a focus around wealth creation. So that focus and the outcome around wealth creation really speaks to our impact indicators. And so our impact indicators look at, so for the startups, we have about 5 flagship programs now. And this program sits between our start, our grow, and scale area. aside from the programs that look at our research and policy advocacy. And so the way we defined our impact indicators, the other thing I meant to add, which I didn't add before, was that in our financial year runs from March to February. So we're starting our new financial year this month. But we have a 5-year strategy plan that we're currently operating on. So that 5-year strategy plan runs from March 2019 to February 2024. And the blueprint details this. So this is just like the high level profile of the impact indicators that we have in our document. So speaking now more towards our operating framework, when before, so this time last year, because this time last year we were still working from the office and everybody was working in person. I tried to map out what our pre-COVID operating structure was. So again, it's still a bit more, it's definitely much more detailed like this, but for the purposes of this presentation, it's on a high level. So first is the leadership from the board and the senior management team at Faith Foundation. And that feeds into our 5-year strategy plan that we're currently operating in. And our 5-year strategy plan was quite detailed in really being a blueprint for how every year, year by year, we'll do people, processes, operations, technology, communications, and all of that. We really worked to detail that. And then from that, it dovetailed into our theory of change, the high level of which I presented, that I presented there. And then that theory of change was also now looked at how do we monitor our programs, how do we evaluate our impact, how do we learn, how do we document, how do we share, and how does that adapt through the organization. Covering all of this again is the larger implications around the entrepreneurship ecosystem and the typical environmental factors that happen. So again, looking at the context of our operations in the way in which the entrepreneurship ecosystem, particularly for small and growing businesses in Nigeria, was evolving, players coming in and out, and then how our role was expanding and continues to expand in the space. So that really formed a lot of things around that. And then for us, it was also around how do we manage our talent? And we have talent in 2 buckets. We have the full-time team members, of which we have about 35 full-time team members at Faith Foundation. And then 500, this 500 here is our volunteer faculty. So because of our nonprofit structure, we're very privileged to have hundreds of people who volunteer their time to teach, to mentor, to advise, to consult, to develop content, and to also support in some other strategic ways. And we have about 500 active at the moment. So our talent management strategies was also looking at that. And that then fed into our processes. So whether our processes around recruiting the participants into our program, managing their learning process and development process, managing the transition to our growth support services, managing the alumni support framework. And then obviously, because we're nonprofits, which also partners with people from funding, again, managing the fund process, the fund management, stakeholder management, and all of that. So we actually have an extensive operating process that covers all that end-to-end procedures that we do. And everything at the end of the day feeds into the impact. So the impact in terms of the kind of work we do, how we impact, how we measure, and how we communicate our impact with all of that. So pre-COVID, or up until this time last year, if I would say, this really was how our operating structure was framed, and the sequence was sort of that. Again, it moved around a bit, but really was sequenced around that. So now this is somewhat like how our operating structure is. And as you see, I said from April 2020 to date, because now it's really still evolving, it's still evolving. It's still evolving as it is. The primary determinant for us now was around, obviously, even though the entrepreneurial ecosystem and the environmental factors were determinants before, but as all of us know, that was now the primary determinant of how we would be as an organization and what we did. And so and there are three things that I could even talk about. I mean, the first one obviously was the COVID-19 pandemic, but subsequently later on in the year, it was also around the NSAS protest, and I'll speak to why that was also important for us and how that even affected our operating structure, particularly from an impact and a learning influence perspective. For those that live in Nigeria and those that live in Lagos in particular, also know that the bridge was closed. There's a main bridge, the major bridge in Lagos called the Third Mainland Bridge. And that also was a significant dynamic that in fact impacted even our operations, particularly from a people perspective. And for us, by the time we got to end of April, and it was clear that the COVID pandemic was not a 2-week or 2-month thing, and it then was clear that it was going to become this evolving process that we really just had to watch and wait. Instead of the way things were before, the number one priority for us really now became our talent, our people. Our people were the driver and still are the driver of the work that we do, how we do our work, and how we do all the things that we did. So the first thing really, like with everybody here, I'm sure, was really understanding how people were they safe, could they work? If they could work, how could they work? What were the flexibilities around the working structure, the working environment, the working dynamics within wherever they were working? And then transitioning again to a fully remote option for about 9 months or 10 months. And then now with some flexibilities for hybrid for those who really, really don't want to work fully from home and may need to occasionally come from the office. And then when we did the talent management part, that now moved to, based on how our people were at the moment, how did we now also need to redesign our enterprise support processes, which at that point in time was premised on a full in-person program. So by this time, we're already doing programs in about 13 states across the country, just pre-COVID, and everything. I mean, I remember looking at our operating manual, which is quite thorough and exhaustive end-to-end, because we really spent quite a lot of time doing it and updating it. But everything was predicated around a fully in-person work and activity, everything. And so we just, in fact, it was even, I remember looking at it and just thinking we couldn't even update it immediately because we didn't even know how things were going and we just needed to evolve. So it was understanding that our whole operating structure was premised around full physical and in-person programming and operations. And we just needed to now start to adapt it to either fully remote and or hybrid, whether from our operations and whether from our program delivery perspective. And then the third was the continued learning and influence even from that. Because then as we were now reaching out to our team members and working with them, was constant learning on the go, constant understanding of the situation, and not even just learning from our team, but learning from our entrepreneurs that we're supporting and learning from the different partners who worked with us, either through maybe just direct institutional partnerships, funding partnerships, or technical partnerships, and really being able to understand and really just learn. And I really have to emphasize that that's something that we just kept doing and kept doing and kept doing. I think one of the things that also came out for us was that our strategy plan, even though we didn't know it at the time when we're doing it, when we're strategizing for it at the end of 2018, was actually able to cover a lot of the elements. So if we looked at the high-level strategy plan as it was and the blueprints we had, one of the key premises and the foundations we had for the critical success factors for strategy blueprint was digital technology adaptation for us to deepen and scale our reach. And so somehow unknown to us, we had already started to build the pillars for that, and that really helped us in the adaptation. So even from a strategy plan point of view, thankfully, we didn't have to significantly change everything. In fact, it's still our high-level strategy objectives are still definitely on path to be achieved, and we're very happy on that. Our theory of change also still remains the same, and obviously, we still had our board and leadership really working with that. The other thing, though, that I'll speak on was our impact, because the way we had started to measure our impact was in different dynamics, but a lot of it was predicated on that, we had this large group of entrepreneurs. Each of the different programs that our entrepreneurs came in had different impact indicators that we were looking at. But now some of those impact indicators were now affected. So I'll give an example. During the NSAS protest, which some of you may be aware of, a number of our businesses were affected. And in fact, there was one of our businesses in particular, if not even one, about 5 of our businesses were completely vandalized. And when I say it was burnt to the ground, all the items were looted and everything was destroyed. So we now had to look and say, okay, how do we now measure our impact? Because there was a way we measured our impact around continued like monitoring and evaluation and learning based on the support we gave them. But because of COVID, because of NSAS in particular, there were certain dynamics that almost now meant that the way we measured the impact stopped. And then we now have to sort of dimension the impact, like, okay, this was pre-COVID impact, during COVID impact, and post-COVID impact. So even our impact reporting, our impact measurement also sort of changed. And on the back of all of this that was going on, we were also doing our 20th year anniversary celebrations. And so we initially had planned to have a series of full-time in-person events because we really felt that we deserved to celebrate our 20 years of impact. But the way we looked at it really also had to change and also impacted the way our operating structures were. So just in rounding up in our key learnings for us, this is what I've itemized and just in very high level points, and I'm happy to elaborate on any of them later. The first thing, again, priority was for talent, and as with everybody here, I'm sure, it was that our people just came first. We are not an organization, we can't be an effective organization without our people, and making sure that we really went way over and beyond to putting people as priority. And putting them as priority meant that we constantly had to test the pulse of the people. We couldn't assume, I, as a leader, could not assume that I knew what people were going through or how they were experiencing. Because even as I was going through, it was almost like everybody was in different phases, also having to understand that our team are in different phases of that. And that also meant that even in our evolving policy changes and operational process reviews, it also had to be flexible with that. One of the things that was and still continues to remain primary for me, because we did a lot of work last year, was that at the first possible scenario, finances permitting, is to also reward people just for and reward again is not just financially, but in different forms, but just really rewarding and celebrating the hard work that the team members put in during, beyond, and all of that, just to show different appreciation. And again, reward meant different things for each people, but just establishing that was there. And I think the last thing I'll say around talent was communication. I mean, we talked about it all through the previous sessions we've had on the Andy workshop series about the importance of communication. But for us, I think one of the things that really was helpful is that when you talk about effective communication, it really came to bear during that time. First was really mapping out all the possible scenarios, but mapping it out in a way that it wasn't just understood to me, but everybody, literally across all the levels of the staff, really understood it. So, and I guess my background in consulting really helped here. So how are you able to present whatever the scenario, whatever the situation is, in an easy, simple way that everybody is able to get the information and understand the message that we're looking to pass across. The second thing for us was looking at our remote working and operation. Again, we're still evolving, but just even understanding the investments that we had to make. So investment in tools. One of the tools that we had to invest in was having power bank that could power laptops. We never had it before, but people have, like everywhere, at least in Nigeria, there were light issues. So internet was sort of like a given that we had to support people on the internet, but we had to support people with ensuring that that we had proper tools, and there were alternative power tools and backups that could support that. From an infrastructural perspective, working remotely a lot, it was investing in learning management systems, and virtual team working systems, way beyond even Zoom or Teams or like the communication platforms, but really much more efficient people management and learning management systems and platforms the way it is. In fact, as with a lot of the organizations here, we now really put on our school, almost like our academic or our university hats, to say that we really are operating almost like a school. And so what are the processes, what are the structures, what are the facilities? And a good suggestion for me here is that when we're thinking of redesigning our operations and just evolving, for a lot of us that do enterprise training programs and support programs, a good benchmark or an example to use is also to look at how universities or tertiary institutions have also adapted to that, because we took in quite a lot of learnings from just looking at university structures. And then M&E process was obviously, as we all know, just really engaging the partners in the conversation, because some of our monitoring and evaluation tools and indicators also evolved and changed. Yeah, and I think for better, actually, with that. So really constantly engaging with that. Engaging is also to let them know of process changes that may impact some of the initial agreements in the contracts that were signed. And then identifying opportunities, because a lot of opportunities came up during this pandemic, even for us as an organization to even deepen and scale our impact. From an M&E perspective, one of the things that was also very crucial, and I think I really appreciated, was user-led storytelling. You know, we've always been told that, you know, your target audience, really, the best way is really letting them to tell their stories of impact of your work. And for a long time, it was a bit difficult for us to do. But last year really presented an opportunity, and we just had a lot of our alumni members reaching us, or actually current beneficiaries just saying, "Oh, we want to share the impact of some of the programs, the experiences, and all of that." And that really was very, very helpful for us, particularly in the celebration of our 20th year. Now we're still evolving. We're still trying to say, okay, are we doing fully virtual? Are we doing in person? Are we doing hybrid? But one of the things we've looked at from across our programs is to say which program will continue fully virtual, which program has to transition to in person, and which programs can be hybrid. I think to a certain extent there will definitely be hybrid, some hybrid way now going forward. Is just now determining, is it 60-40, 80-20, 90-10, 50-50 spread and reach. And the last thing I will say is really about celebrating all wins, no matter how small, no matter how little, no matter how foolish it may seem, but particularly from a team engagement perspective and talent management perspective, really, really, really celebrating all wins as little and as possible, particularly wins that are personal to people. So even family matters and all of that, particularly because we're not able to engage with it. In rounding up and starting this new financial year, one of the things that we've said is that instead of our typical, if you remember from what I said, our financial year starts in March. But what we said, typically we would have had a strategy planning session in March. But for the first time, we said, no, we're just going to do a team bonding retreat. We really know what we want to do this year. Let us just come together in a safe way, as social distance as we can be, and really just celebrate, really just bond together again as a team, and really just have fun. So I'll be happy to take any questions later on, but thank you very much, everyone, for listening to me. Thanks. Hi, Didrik, I'm done. I hope everybody heard me though. Okay.
No, everybody did, and I think that was an amazing presentation that you gave, and I think fantastic work that you've been able to do in this quite hard and I would say sort of trying time that we've all been in, and thank you so much for taking us through it. As indicated, we'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A towards the end. So I'd like to ask everybody to save their questions till then, till we are at the end. For now, it is time for us at the African Management Institute to present. And I will quickly just give a bit of an overview about myself and about AMI. And then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Asha, who is our Director of Operations and Talent. And she'll be able to take you very quickly through the journey that we at AMI have had in terms of starting to work remotely, what we've done there, and how we've been able to keep people motivated, apart from the amazing work that Asha has done to do that. And then we're going to show you one of the tools that we have that we think will help all of your organizations in this time, as we are now in this hybrid phase where we're looking at how can we go back into the office, I think, Anika, as you say, like at a safe distance, still be able to meet with each other. What should we consider then? What changes do we want to keep, and how do we want to go about that? So let me share my screen, and immediately I flag a slight technology challenge. So I'm going to share a PowerPoint and not a full-on presenter view, because I have two screens and then I can't actually see it at the moment. So I'm going to just share this AMI presentation in this way. So I hope that you can all see African Management Institute up on your screen now. Great. So thank you so much. So I am, as said, I'm Diederik. I'm the head of special projects at the African Management Institute. And what that means is that I'm responsible for expanding our footprint into other countries. Amongst others, we are working on expanding into Nigeria, Francophone West Africa, and Uganda. We have offices in Rwanda, in Kenya, and in South Africa already. And during the pandemic, I was the country manager in Rwanda, and I was managing our office and our staff there. Now, the African Management Institute, our goal is to enable ambitious businesses across Africa to thrive. And that sounds very broad, but what it boils down to is that we provide workplace learning and support to help entrepreneurs and managers with tools and training that they need to make their businesses succeed, grow, and for business owners to feel more control and better within their businesses. How do we do that? We work with various people across the continent. We've trained 30,000 people so far. We've worked in 36 countries. We've translated all our content into 4 different languages, and the tools that we use have been downloaded 1.4 million times. We work with mainly developmental partners who fund projects for us. So you see a number of these up there. A number of them you'll know, things like MasterCard, USAID, etc. But we also work with private organizations, KLM, Radisson, and some of the bigger names we've worked with. And for each of those, we have different offerings that we give, either on the workplace learning side or on the business development support side. As said, equipping entrepreneurs and SMEs with key tools, help businesses to get motivated and productive workforce. And I think another very important leg of the work that we do is to run work readiness programs and entry-level programs for young people starting their careers. Now, there are a number of organizations that do similar things to us or have a lot of linkages. So why AMI? How are we different? What is at the core of everything that we do is that we focus on practical tools, and we'll show you an example of what this practical tool means a bit later in this session. We don't want to talk at you too much. This will probably be the most that you'll ever hear someone from AMI talk in one go. We focus on businesses, specifically what are the needs for businesses, how can we help them, and we want to focus on all the wonderful technology that there is now to help you learn. So providing content on the go through mobile applications that we have, through a mobile platform that we can use, that you can get the type of learning and type of support you need at that point in your hand straight away. We have what's called a blended learning methodology. That means that we spend a lot of time on the online resources I've mentioned, videos, tools, practical things you can do whenever you're ready for it. We use interactive learning labs, and you'll get a taste of that a bit later in this session, where you're able to experience some of the things you want to do yourselves. And we work a lot with on-the-job assignments and activities that we expect people to do. Everything also supported by buddies, mentors, people within the program that are going through a similar journey that you are going through. Now, zooming in a bit again on the products that we have, we believe that learning support, it's a journey. It's not just a moment in time. A session such as this, it will help you probably get a bit of a feel of what you might need, what it is that you might be missing. But if we're talking about organizational change, if we're talking about change within your business, as you've noticed over the past 12 months, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, and one training, one session is usually not enough for that, which is why everything is structured around multiple touch points and multiple support moments throughout. Now, quickly going into some of the programs we offer. So firstly, we have entrepreneurship and small business programs. There, we originally started out with a program which was called Grow Your Business. And Grow Your Business was really focusing on MSMEs, how can we get them more in control of the business, provide them with the tools that they need, and take them through the 6-month learning journey? What happened with the pandemic when that hit is that we saw that immediately needs of businesses changed. I think Annika had some great examples. All of a sudden, people are looting your shop, or a bridge is closed, you can't meet clients anymore. What now? What do you need to do? When that happened, and when that happened within the pandemic, we used all our knowledge, all the talent we had within our business, we pulled that together and we said, how can we as quickly as possible turn this around and create something for businesses to meet their most immediate need? And we came up with what we called business survival boot camps, which was sessions of an hour and a half long, all online via Zoom. And we started talking about scenario planning, cash flow forecasting, and risk analysis, the 3 things we thought are most important at that point. And what does that mean? Very simply, is we designed a program which just focused on if the lockdown in your country is not going to last 2 weeks but 2 months, what will that mean for your business? What will that mean for your cash runway? And what other risks are there? So in those types of ways, we pivoted and we continue to support the businesses we work with. Other programs that we have are micro enterprise accelerators for the really micro businesses, how we can get them to become more established, continue to survey their clients, know what the needs are, manage their cash, manage their transactions. And also we have several Start Your Business programs that we usually do, collaborating with business incubators, collaborating with startup hubs, etc. Now, as I mentioned, that business development support, that's one element of what we do at AMI. The second element, which might be very interesting for most of the people on this call, is workplace learning programs. We believe that good organizations are about more than just the business owner, are about more than just having the right processes in place. They're also very much about the people in that organization. So we have a holistic approach to workplace learning, where we say it isn't enough to just train the CEO or the owner. It isn't enough to just train the junior staff. If you look at it, you need to think about everybody within the organization and have something for everybody in that organization to meet their needs. So we have leadership development programs that focus on the top level management, thinking about cultural changes, change management. What if your organization is changing rapidly? What support do you need? Heavily involved in coaching, heavily involved in interacting together and working on specific projects and specific challenges. A second workplace learning program that we have at AMI is what we call our management development program. There, I think if any of you is managing people, potentially you got into it the same way I did. You're in a job, you're good at that job, and then someone tells you, now go and manage people and tell them how to do the job that you were doing, but don't do your own job anymore, and good luck with that. Without actually knowing, but what does that mean? How do I manage people? How do I get them motivated? How do I delegate tasks? And how do I think about their work? That is what management development program is all about, taking people that are really good at their job, have started their management career, helping them with the tools to actually become better managers and to be the managers of the future. And the third tier that I think I mentioned was our Thrive at Work program, which is for junior employees. Those who just come into a business, they need a lot of support on how to be the right employee and how to actually be able to contribute the most value to a business. So how do you manage your time, your calendar? How do you manage upwards towards your manager? And also the basics of sales and selling yourself, selling the product of the company and being engaged there. Now, the third leg that I mentioned very quickly that we do within AMI is our youth employability program, which I think sort of speaks for itself. It's how can we get people into the workplace in the best way possible and equip them with what they need to really be the employees of the future and share that with the companies that they're in. Now that's in very brief what we do at AMI. As said, we've done it in 36 countries. We work with development partners and with private organizations. And one of the main things I think that we have seen from our clients when we moved virtually is that the needs, to a large extent, they really remained there. They got a lot bigger. They changed sometimes, more immediate, not thinking about 1 year in advance, but thinking about like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or maybe sometimes a day into the future. So we really started equipping that. And I think what's interesting and what more of the session will be about is this workplace learning aspect, where no matter how well run your organization was, you probably got some surprises along the way when you started going into actually having to manage your team fully remotely and go into this new structure and deal with the challenges that there were for COVID, both on a personal level for employees as well as for yourself on an organizational level. We used a lot of the talent that we had in-house and a lot of the creativity to come up with some changes to how we worked. And Asha, as said, our Director of Operations and Talent, is going to take you through in a few minutes what we did when the crisis started, how we've changed some things, and what we're currently doing in this, what we call the new normal. And afterwards, I will show you one of the tools that have helped us and many of the organizations we worked with in also adapting to that same environment. So Asha, I'd like to hand over to you.
Thanks, Diedrich. Can everybody hear me well? You can hear me well, Diedrich? Great.
Yes, very well, thank you.
Adenike, it's so hard to come after you because you did such a fantastic job of covering end to end. And so I want to start with kind of a really good kind of engagement with the participants on the call. What has been a fear that you've had, or something that really just gnaws on your brain, or sometimes when you go to sleep and you think about your team, be it managing remotely or moving, kind of creating this hybrid structure of remote and in-person coming to work. What are some of the fears you have, some of the issues you have? I just kind of want to see that on chat. Just feel free to put them in. And as you're putting them in, I'll read them out. But in the meantime, I can kind of summarize some of the things that have really worked at AMI. So the very first thing that I use as a foundation of anything that I want to deploy in terms of teams and in terms of thinking about a organizational wide strategy is to think about what is the life cycle of an employee. Have you ever thought about that? What is the life cycle? And this, I'm not meaning that, from the time they're born to the time, something else happens. I'm talking about from the time you interact with them to the point that they leave you. And there are different steps there, and there are 5 steps. And I want you to keep those in mind because those will really, really foundationally help you whenever you're thinking about different strategies to deploy. The very first thing is recruitment. How do we recruit? Who do we recruit? How do we ensure different aspects of us are shown in how we recruit? The second thing is, how do we onboard, right? How do we onboard? Who do we onboard? Who's in that process of onboarding? The third thing is engagement and learning. Every single employee that you recruited, you've onboarded, you now need to start thinking about how do I engage them and how do they continuously learn? And the fourth thing is performance management. And a lot of times we kind of jump into performance management as the first thing, and you start thinking, but I think this is the core thing, but you haven't really thought about all the other steps, right? And the fifth thing is, how does this person exit? I know it's the last thing we want to think about, but that is the life cycle of almost every single employee that you will recruit to the point that they leave you. So just to repeat that: 1, recruitment; 2, onboarding; 3, engagement and learning; 4, performance management; and 5, exit. Now, whenever you're thinking about how do I change the strategy of my people, how do I move my people online, how do I, kind of think about the different things I need to do, I think about 3 other key things. So I'm giving you a lot of different points, but these form the foundation of how you think about things. And those are also the foundations of how we thought about shifting people to online. And I'll give you a couple of good examples. I want you to always remember 3 key things. 1, connect. How do people connect with my organization, or me as a founder, or me as an employee who's probably in the process of doing lots of people operation across these different 5 things? Second thing is culture. How does our culture come out in all of these aspects of the employee life cycle? So does our culture come out in recruitment? Does our culture come out at the exit interview as well? Because if you have a mishap, then you the story doesn't really connect. And the third one is rhythm. How do we have rhythm in the entire organization as we do what we do, right? Is everybody with me? Are we all together? I hope so. So let me give you a couple of examples of what we've done, right? Remember, we have recruitment, onboarding, engagement and learning, performance management, and exit, right? And remember, what we're trying to do is we're trying to connect, We're trying to make sure that people know our culture. And the third thing is that we're trying to make sure there's rhythm, right? So how do we connect at AMI? What have we done in the different processes? And I'll pick a couple, right? The very first thing that we've done when it comes to connecting is that we know that it's extremely difficult to connect online as opposed to really just bumping into anyone. And I know Adenike, you mentioned that as well, right? You're not seeing these people all the time, right? So you start thinking, how do we connect? And one of the things we've done is to think about we've had, in the very onset, we had daily meetings for about 7 minutes. Of course, they grew into much longer ones, but it was so important for people to come together and connect. So you don't feel alone. You don't feel like, oh my goodness, things are happening. And in the connection, we started to think about, but who is AMI? What is our culture? We are young, we're hip, we are maybe even healthy, and we started to work out, right? And we started to do really quick, fun workouts. And I remember some people even designed or thought about, how do you do a workout while you're sitting down? I know it sounds impossible, but people can get very creative when they don't want to work out, right? But you see just that people still smiled and they could feel that connection, right? So you think about that. How do we connect? And while we're connecting, how do I make sure there's culture, right? That is being drawn there. The second thing I want to talk about is now different points of culture. How do you make culture a competitive strategy? How do you make culture this viral thing that even if another company comes and says, hey, Diedrich, do you want to come and work for me? Diedrich would be like, no, there's a great culture at AMI. I don't want to, right? And that's the thing that you want. Right? That's how powerful culture is, right? And so we started to think about, how do we make sure that our culture is seen in all of this, right? And one of the things we did is we ensured that we have culture ambassadors. And there's a different term I've seen when it comes to when you read about people ops. I think they're called ERGs or something like that. And so the culture ambassadors essentially emulate that sense of culture in every organization, in every single kind of country or team sometimes. And you want them to make sure, and you want these people to emulate your values. So culture isn't just a feel-good thing. It also is feel-good, but it also is born out of really, really intentional emulation of your values. If your values are being empathetic, then let that be something within your culture that is emulated, that is cheered on whenever that happens. So we did different things around that. We also have the worst singing possibly in the entire, I have never heard any people, like, we cannot sing sing happy birthday. That is how bad we are. But you know what? It makes people smile. It makes people happy. And we always sing, we remember people's birthdays, and it's small things, all right? And you need to start thinking about the small things as well. What small things would really emulate your culture? Your culture is about making sure that everybody's seen, everybody's heard, everybody is important, right? And so you want to do that as well. The third thing that we really thought was extremely helpful was rhythm, right? Was the rhythms of things. Now, it sounds odd, but you're like, but why do I need to think about making sure everybody's in rhythm? It is difficult. You'll probably never have at any one point where 100% of everybody's in rhythm, but you know what? 70% is really, really, really good. And you need to think about, because everybody is dispersed, you're not in the office, how do you create this nice rhythm, like, I'm working on this is really important. So one of the things that we've done is to think about our weekly rhythms, all right? And so I'll start by the first kind of, at the start of the quarter, we've identified the key things we need to achieve, not only for the year, but also for the quarter. That trickles down to almost each individual. Then how do I contribute to this goal? And that's really, really important for everybody to know. People need to know how or what they're doing, right? What must I accomplish at the end of each quarter, at the end of each week? So that's taken down. And then we think about our work weeks as sprints, right? We think about generally achieving our mission as a marathon, but on a week by week, we think about it as sprints. And why sprints? Why sprints? Because of prioritization. You cannot do everything. I know there's supermen and superwomen here, but not all of us have your capabilities. So we try as much as possible to prioritize, and sprinting allows you to do that. So at the very start of the week on Mondays, we have a whole team call. We talk about what key things do we want to achieve that week. And it's not 5 things. It's usually 2 or 3 things, right? We don't do updates then. If it's updates, it's quick wins, all right? But we do very clear, these are the things these are the things we are working on as a team. So that's a team level. At individual level, they're reporting to their managers as well, as these are the key things. So you see there's kind of a rhythm, right, of what they need to do. And then, because if you're familiar with sprints, because sometimes life gets in the way, and our colleagues and calls and come for this meeting, do this and that. Just in the spirit of a sprint, we have sectioned out what we call a focus block. And what that means is that there are no calls. So ironically, Diedrich and I are here right after our focus block, which is great. So during a focus block, it gives you time as an individual to work on your contribution to the goals you need to accomplish, right? And you're thinking, but what do I need to collaborate? You have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You have half of Thursday, and you have Friday to collaborate, but you have 3 to 4 hours, and if you want more, to block out and say, guys, I have a sprint focus block. So the entire organization really respects that focus block and really makes sure that you are working on kind of the priorities for the week. So you're trying to get everybody in rhythm, right? And then the next Monday, you're now talking about was I able to achieve? What are some of the blockers? How do we get on top of this as quickly as possible? So those are some of the quick wins we've had. But at the end of it, it's really important to ensure that you are empathetic. It's hard. I know. I've done it. I can't even think about all the things that sometimes you're thinking about. It's not easy. For some of us, we're doing this for the first time. So cut yourself some slack as well. You're doing this for the first time. You've never been in a global pandemic. You're kind of getting out of it. This is the first time most of us are doing this. So being empathetic to also realize there are lots of your employees are also doing this, or your colleagues are also doing this for the first time. So working from home, I remember the first few times, and my daughter still comes and she's like, Mom, when are you going to get off this call? And I'm like, there's nothing I can do, right? And at first I used to try and hide it, but now I just can't. I'm like, well, just a few minutes and you continue. So we're still kind of learning, and it's been almost over a year now. So that empathy is really important, to recognize that you're also doing this for the first time, but also your team is also doing this for the first time. So if people come and tell you, listen, we're having too many meetings, think about what that means. Are they not able to accomplish their work? What's going on? So don't just take it as like, we just have to, right? Think about, what does this mean for different individuals? And how can I reduce maybe that meeting time? How do I make sure that, culture is in every single step of the way? And don't lose sight of the bigger picture, which is you have 5 steps of your employee life cycle that you really need to think about at each different step. So that's it from me. If there are any questions, please share them with Diedrich.
Thank you so much, Asha. And as I said, you need to, we'll have a Q&A session, I think, at the end. So please keep your questions till then. I think I was smiling through a lot of this, mainly because if anybody ever wonders why would you work at AMI, I think Asha has perfectly stated that in terms of, I think, what we do for culture, how important that is, how important our employees are to us, and the work that we've been doing. And cutting yourself some slack and having that empathy, I think, is one of the most important takeaways that we have. But there's also another element to it, and that's the element that's going to lead us into our breakout session. Because what maybe I haven't mentioned is that at AMI, we are a very data-driven organization, and we believe that it's great to think things, it's great to feel things, but it's always better to know things. And what better way to start thinking about what you can actually know than by asking the people who know most about it, which are, in this case, your employees. So what we do a lot, and what we would encourage everybody to do a lot, is to think about, how can I ask the people that know best for their input. And for that, we have developed a what we call a pulse check survey. And very simply put, if you want to check your pulse, you know your heartbeat, you know if you're happy, sad, out of breath because you're just back from a run, or just very scared. And that is the same what we try to do with our pulse check. So I'm going to share my screen and walk you through it. Sorry, I need to do this differently. There we go. I'm just going to share my screen, walk you through it, and then you'll be in a breakout session where you will actually have, where you'll actually have this pulse check in front of you as well. Now, the tool that you're going to see now will be uploaded into the chat function of Zoom.
Dietrich?
Yes, sorry.
We're seeing your we're seeing your emails and.
Sorry, that's again my tech. I swear I was sharing a different screen. Then you saw my notes for this session. Can you see the right screen now?
Yes.
Is it does it say pulse check survey? Okay. As I said, I think this is a process we're all still learning. I embarrassingly proved that twice. So this pulse check that we have here is something that we actually use a lot within our own company. And what I would like to ask you is to look onto the chat of Zoom, download this pulse check before you go into your breakout session. And for the breakout session, take a few minutes to think about the questions that we're going to ask here. I'm going to go through them in a bit more detail and assess how you're doing in your own business against different questions that there are. Once you've done that, in that session, I would like you to discuss the 2 topics that you've rated the lowest, and based on the input that we've received from Asha, from Anika, think about what are some of the things you can do about that. And I said, like, the power of this pulse check comes from asking the people that know best. So I would also encourage you, when you're thinking about, to think about what your employees might actually answer to these questions, and maybe not just yourself. So to go through it, what we have in our pulse check is a scale of 1 to 5, where we say, if you're an employee in the company, do you understand what your manager expects from you? Do you have what it takes to get that done? In the last 7 days, did you receive recognition or praise for doing anything right? What did you think about the team atmosphere? Was it good? Was it bad? Was it somewhere mediocre? Are you generally happy at work? And really think about that. Are you happy at work? Not, you know, I just stubbed my toe, or I have a cold, or etc. But are you happy at work? Not in your overall everything, how it's going. And I think one last question is, how likely would you be to recommend your company or your product or your service to a friend or your colleague? And these are some very, very brief questions, but they will be really important. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to download this from the Zoom chat. And then I'm going to ask you to go into a breakout session, take a few minutes in the breakout session to answer these questions, and then talk with each other about the 2 things you've rated lowest, and crowdsource some solutions that you might come up with to help with that. And keep in mind, as I said, the comments that Asha gave, the comments that Anika gave around how different companies might do that. And I think that I see that Confidence has also put it on Google Drive, so you can also use that link to access the tool if downloading isn't working for you. So Confidence, I think with that, we can go into the breakout session. I think the breakout session will be 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll come back. We'll want to hear some highlights of the breakout session, and then we'll have the time for the Q&A for all your burning questions that you've been saving up for us for so long. Great. So I'll assume that this is everybody that we have back from the breakout rooms. My apologies for any confusion. The idea was to fill out the survey and talk about some issues that you were facing within your own business. But I realize as many of you are CEOs or owners of the business that you're working with, it's very difficult to think in terms of what your employees might fill out there. And for all of those, I would say, you know, use the survey to send it through to your employees and then get their input. And once you have that, start thinking about like what what opportunities might you have to improve there. And I also will be sharing with confidence a second tool that we have that might help you in coming up with those solutions. And then I'm sure that you can share it with those attendees that we're here now. But I think we've waited long enough before I gave all of you the chance to ask your burning questions from Anika and from Asha, specifically around how they both managed to pull their organizations through the last 12 months of, I can say, crisis, and to still have very engaged and confident employees at the end of it. So I'd now like to open up for Q&A, and we have about 15 minutes for that. So feel free to unmute and ask your question, or post it in the chat if you're unsure about your background noise or your internet connection. So sorry. Ola, I'm gonna probably mispronounce a lot of names. My apologies. But I see a raised hand. Please go ahead and unmute yourself, and you can ask your question.
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Derek, and Aisha and Denika for the wonderful presentation. Yeah, I think I have two questions, and one and the two are certainly for the ED of Faith Foundation. One, I will appreciate to get a link to existing R&D reports from the Faith Foundation. Then the second one, for us that do a bit of social enterprise projects, we're using technology to assist farmer in rural space. Now, in the course of during the lockdown, of course, government said people working in the agricultural space, but in reality, we discovered that the law enforcement agents are different. The difference between, in our case, the difference between policy and enforcement on the field when it comes to reality for Nigeria as a case study. So now I need you to advise separately how to handle scenario like that. Then back to you as an organization. Now I understand that if you have to take your staff remotely, you have to invest in a bit of infrastructure, data, laptop, and whatever. So how are you able to manage that? Thank you.
Thank you, Olaide. So you've asked 3 questions. The answer to your first question, I've posted the link, so faithfoundation.org/research, and you'll be able to see all our thought leadership materials. I believe everything should be there. I'm almost certain everything should be there on the website. So please feel free to download them. So that's number 1. Number 2, with respect to how do you manage like environmental hurdles? So we also have quite a lot of agribusinesses within our network. In fact, we have an accelerator program and a pre-incubator program for agribusinesses. And I remember between April and May, passes were a real issue that they had, just moving, particularly those that maybe they lived in Lagos, but their farms were in Ogun or Yor, maybe Ekiti, and then just that road commute was a problem. One of the things that helped, and one of the things that helped and continues to help, is that my advice to you is that, particularly if you're in the agribusiness space, go and join the local chamber of commerce or business with respect to your sector. And this is actually across all sectors. And so we're a member of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I'm actually a member of the Council of LCCI. And a number of our entrepreneurs that had issues and were members of LCCI were able to get passes that either LCCI got through NASEMA or MAN. So MAN is Manufacturers Association of Nigeria and all of that. So usually when you require those type of things, it really, really helps to be a member of a trade group, an industry association, because what then happens is that you're in a group with people who are also going through and experiencing similar challenges as you are, and you can get the required pass or waiver or whatever as a person or as a group or as an association with that. So that's my lowest hanging fruit, and it works every time. And it's not just with that, but across so many other issues that happen from an industry or sector-based perspective. The third part is even for us. So yes, a lot of, so I'm smiling, our finance officer, Oyinda Mola, is on this call. And so when you were asking the question around, so when we started working remotely, obviously people now started using a lot more data and all of that, even for some of our programs. So there's some of our programs that we had that some that were free or are free, and some of our participants really do not have the resources to be able to buy the size of data, particularly if we require that people have to be in person. So what we did was move things around. So in a lot of our in-person expenses for our training programs, we weren't spending on food, on drinks, and so all of that. So we moved a lot of those cost allotments straight to data for the program implementation. But then we also built it into the program planning. So for instance, even as a team, before then, a certain number of the team used to get like phone credit and data and phone credit allocation. But what we did then, and again, this is staged because at the initial first quarter when all of this started, we couldn't build in all of those costs, and we continue to review it on a timely basis. So before, it was only very certain people who trained outside or who had programs outside of Lagos that will have MiFi or internet data. Now we're getting to the point that everybody, not just even program team members, but everybody will have it. Everybody has some sort of internet data allocation credit, and my colleague will confirm if I'm right or wrong, but it is. But we're even expanding it. So now it's even in terms of payroll, it's becoming a significant expense with that. So look at the expenses that you're not really expending on, and then translate them to the actual source, because the resources you needed pre-COVID, some of them have changed slightly. And to be able to run programs or even work efficiently, you require phone data and all of that. The other issue we've been having lately is that laptops are also, obviously, because now, before, some people would leave their laptops at the office and lock it and all of that. So a lot of laptops, as we found out that they're just falling a bit more. So again, looking at those type of policies and the options around that. The third thing which I spoke about was around backups, because one of the things that, so with the initial survey we did for team members, so similar to this pulse, but much more detailed, in now testing issues around, do you have power? In fact, the way the survey was, we asked people the kind of power provisioning they had where they were. So what kind of power did they use? Were they more reliant on NEPA here, quote and unquote, or did they have inverters in their house? Were they using generators? If they were using generators, was it diesel gen? Was it petrol gen? On the average, how much did they spend in a month? Because we had people who were living not by themselves, who were living, for instance, with parents and other family members. And quite a number of my team members complained that, their families were complaining because they had to be, so if somebody is managing a program, they had to be online for most part. And because of them, the family was turning on the generator that maybe they would typically not have been turning on during the day. And so we had to start provisioning so we sort of did the provisioning allocation based on the requirements. So I think for some groups of people, we provided a cash support, particularly if what they were using was petrol, I believe. And then for some people, we had to get a backup alternate power solution, because there are people that didn't even have light for up to 1 hour a day, and they also did not have generator. Maybe they had generator, but to fill the generator was a significant amount. So we just got a backup power charger that was able to do that. Again, every 3 months, 4 months were revolved. So I know that right now our finance and HR team are discussing, because we're going to review that process again. So it's learning as you go, but we cannot put the employees at a disadvantage if we want our programs and operations and all of that to run efficiently. The other thing also is that for a lot of us that are doing donor-funded programs, have detailed discussions with your donors around the change in line. So they're line items that we'll be adding that were not there before. We'll have a conversation with them about why those costs are important to running the program, but also let them know the things that you're not spending again for, that you normally would have spent for when you were implementing programs before. Thank you.
Hello, I also have a question. And my question is, I don't know if you experience it, because I experience it. There's some people that have difficulties working on their own, remotely. They only work better in a structured office environment. How did you manage those kind of people? Because it's a real challenge for someone.
Thanks, Ibuku. And I'll answer, and I'm sure that Jedrick also will have a response. So, yes, I think, yeah. Okay. Have you finished? Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay,
yes.
Great. So what you were talking about was issues around performance management. And sometimes performance management also for particular types of people, depending on work styles, in line with what the deliverables was expected for them. Again, I think the first thing, again, why I also said that, and I liked what Asha was saying and what Didrik spoke about, that sometimes even in this situation, you almost have to be over empathetic, A lot of times we may want to think that people don't want to do work. And yes, you're probably right. There probably may be some of our team members that may not want to do work and are happy that they don't have that direct supervision. But what I've also discovered is that we actually are working more efficiently now over time than we did before. Probably maybe more than we did. So my own challenge is now how to make sure that people work less and not work more. So one of the things that we did by month 4 was to say, unlike when you come to the office and you're expected to work 8 to 5, people have different dynamics in their home situations and their home environments. And I'll speak for the women, for instance. 2 of my team members came to meet me that on certain days of the week, that they needed the flexibility to not have to respond to work or emails around 8 to 11 because they were doing homeschooling, and that they just could not do it. But that if it was to respond from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., they will make the flexibility and the arrangements and the accommodations for that. And so when those conversations came up, I just said at the end of the day, if you're given assignments to do in the week, each of the reporting line managers should make sure that they sit down at the beginning of the week with their team members and agree what the deliverables for the week would look like, and when each of those deliverables would be sent in, and what it would look like when a deliverable is completely finished and sent in. Now, if that person sends it in at 12 a.m., that is fine. I'm not going to, do you understand? At whatever time, just make sure that by whatever you've defined as the deadline, in conversation with the person, is being sent in, is done. That's number 1. Number 2 was that, sometimes we also really needed to understand the challenges people have, to know whether or not this is really a situation around the person, or there are other environmental factors around the person. So we have people who were working and living with brothers and siblings or sisters. So one of our team members actually for a long period of time had to stay with his cousin because he couldn't be managing a program when living in a space where other people were also doing a lot of noise. So sometimes people may not also be in the environment that allows them to work efficiently. Now, when we've crossed out every other thing that we think may not help the person to work efficiently, and we've done all of that, then it is now performance-related conversations. And that performance-related conversation has to happen regardless. So you now put into effect whatever performance management structure you have, and you work with the person to say, okay, obviously understand this is what was expected, this is what you're doing, this is where you're falling short, this is how we need you to work and act on. And then put in if you have an HR team or you're large enough, or if you don't have an HR team, try to work with the person just really to understand and let them also engage with you so that they also understand where you think they're lacking and working constructively with them in this. If all of this fails and then you're now talking about performance issues, then I guess the next point is now to disengage the staff, because it's now more of performance appraisal issues and more of productivity issues. So those are sort of the steps that I would suggest in terms of addressing that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think really, I think I would like to echo that. I think that especially like the last part of it, I think that's one of the hardest things there is when you, there are some employees that were good employees till all of this happened, and then they start having like real performance issues, about sort of somewhere like 12 months ago, 6 months ago, whatever. And then indeed, like you support them, you provide your empathy a very long part of the way. At some point there is, you know, you have to say like, I'm not in the business, or I'm in the business as a charity to support hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs out there, not to support loads of employees that aren't actually able to do the work. And I'm very sorry, but you were a great employee. You're clearly not able to work in this organization now that the crisis hit. So that's the point when we need to start thinking about disengaging, which is a final step, which only comes after much support, but I think which we do need to be very clear about, and also need to be very clear towards employees, because sometimes they think, well, you know, I can not do any work for however long this crisis lasts because, hey, everybody's struggling. And I think that's something which you just need to be very fair and very clear on. I think another element is, I think that's something that Asha mentioned as well, is to think about, you know, one thing is looking at the employees you currently have, but also think about the employees that you want to start hiring. How do you test for that self-startingness? I think one of the best things that I would sometimes have is to be, you know, if someone doesn't show up to an interview, yes, that can be because of internet issues, and that happens, and it happens to every single one of us. But if that person either before, after, during, whatever, gives some sign of life, then I'm all the way there. And even if that's like sending a text message from Nigeria to Kenya, you can be like, well, okay, someone invested, it's an expensive text message to send, but you know that's the type of employee that's a self-starter that looks at solving a problem. If someone comes back the next day and says, oh, my internet was out, and the dog ate my homework, and this is what happened, and you think, well, was there really no way for you to reach out? Then you know those are going to be the type of employees you will have problems with along the line as well. I think that's something which is important to take into account in your recruitment. So I hope that answers your question. I see we also have a question that came in through the chat from Shada. Let me just read that. With most processes moving remote, in your experience, what are some of the best practices that one can deploy to engage startups and organizations they support or work with remotely? Anika, do you want to start first, and I can say some of the things we're doing at AMI?
Yeah, so I think I'll share our own experiences. So first off, we support startups and businesses across board. One of the great things, and one of the things this opportunity has provided, or the pandemic provided, was an opportunity for us to fully expand the virtual management of it. Because whether remote or whether supporting remote or even in person, adopting technology and digitizing the processes is required, and it really helps to make things efficient. So what we needed to do was to find tools that we could use for each of the key elements that we did. So if I look at the key elements, the first is recruitment. And thankfully, one of our partners, who is also an Ande partner, had gotten the partnership with Salesforce. So we have a CRM Salesforce platform that allows us to manage thousands and thousands of applications towards all our different programs. And we get sometimes up about 10,000 a year. So that has helped us with that. The one that we had challenges with, and that now really became more, was really the learning management system. And that's why I said, because again, if you support startups, you have the recruitment, you have the training, and then you have the different forms of business support, so whether mentoring, business advisory, and all of that, and however way you are monitoring and assessing the growth. For the training part, that was the comment I made earlier on, I'm not sure you were there, where I said you have to put on the hat almost like you're in a school, almost like you're in your university, and thinking of how you manage that. Simple things like when we're doing in-person trainings, you get your training packs, your books and everything. And we had already, imagine you've spent 19 years, we had spent 19 years perfecting the process of doing hard copy, reading materials and all of that. And then all of a sudden, all of those things, you're now doing it virtually. So one of the things we've had to develop, which we are just rolling out actually, is a learning management system that makes it a bit easier. So initially, we're now using like Google folders, creating assignments and all of that with it, making sure we put Zoom in the calendars, but it can be quite bulky. So look at any of the learning management system tools that work. and we use one with Teachable now. So quite a lot of these platforms also have, for those of us that have nonprofit status, also have nonprofit discounts, or you can use the these organizations that provide keys at significantly discounted rates for nonprofits to do that. So we have a learning management system that now helps us to manage the learning part and the teaching part of it. Now, depending on the kind of support you have, so whether you're an incubator or an accelerator, and depending on how you define your impact indicators and the kind of data you get, you have to sit and find systems that work for you. Sometimes I find out that just simply designing a good Excel tool or a good Excel sheet, if you get somebody that is very experienced in Excel, can also help you around mapping and monitoring those mail data that you use to track and all of that. At the end of the day, one of the things you should do is just strategize, or just sit down really and say, what is the exact, let's list out all the processes that take place in each of the support programs that we need. What are the tools that we have? What are the processes that are a significant problem for us? Because you can have processes, some of it may still be manual in some way, but they're not issue areas. So you really may not need now to invest some sort of tools or technology or whatever in it. So once you've mapped out your processes, and then you've mapped out the ones that are really challenge areas that would even impact on your quality and your impact outcome, I find out that reach out to and that's part of why we're in this conversation. So reach out to your Andy member account managers and just explain, okay, we have this problem. Do you, as Andy, or do you have any members we can speak to that have similar problems, but they had tools? Because within our groups, we will probably find somebody or find several people that have been able to develop something that's available. And sometimes you find out that there are even free tools that are available for solving whatever the issues or we need. I'm sure Didrik will speak on the AMI tools and templates or whatever platforms that they also have that are available. So reach out within the Andy network, find out what's available in line with your needs, and then again, phase the adoption, because it's not every tool that's for everybody that may work for you. So find a way of testing it across a small group. Look at the cost implications, not just cost implications for how much you may need to pay, but even how much you may need to maintain it. Some tools also work at smaller levels, but if you need to scale it, there are also problems around it. But I think now more than ever, every one of us needs some sort of technology resource persons as part of our team, relevant to the issues we have and also the challenges we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And I'd really like to echo that. So I think that within AMI, like there are two, I think, sort of very distinct things. So firstly, we're very happy in that we already had a platform that we worked on for years and years. So for us, it wasn't an idea of, having to move online. A lot of actually what we were providing was already online on our learning platform. And I think that's something which is very valuable, to have somewhere where people you're supporting can go to, which is more or less a central location where they can benefit from the tools and from what it is that you're providing. But I think secondly, something that's become a lot more important in this recent pandemic has been this idea around sort of going where your participants go and use the platforms that your participants use. And I'm not like a great technology user myself, so like for me, it's WhatsApp, and that's would be the main thing, and then there's Slack, and there's all like these corporate tools. But most of the businesses we support, they've never even heard of Slack, but they may be huge users of Instagram. So you can think about, okay, so how do we use Instagram? Or there can be this entire element of which we had in Rwanda, for example, where people say, well, the issue is with all these things, it's not a reading culture. And like, okay, great, it's not a reading culture. So shall we start sending voice notes if voice notes do work better? Or shall we send links to YouTube videos where someone can just click a link and watch a YouTube video? Is that better if we explain something that way instead of sending 8 lines of text on WhatsApp that nobody's going to read? So I think that that combination of those two, I think that's the most important. Having something central, which can be a platform, which can be a Google Drive, whatever, where people can go to for the resources back and forth the entire time. And the other one, going where your participants go and using the ways of contacting them that they prefer, instead of saying, this is what we use, this is what we prefer, and you better start using what we use, because that's going to be very counterproductive.
I so echo that, because and what you said between WhatsApp and Slack is such a perfect example. Even as a team member, my team members just really did not take to Slack, and we just realized WhatsApp works. Why do we need to reinvent the wheel? But the other point that Didrik is also making, you can even for us, we've had to segment our target audience, because there are some of our target audience that could use certain tools, but could not use certain tools, or not that they couldn't use certain tools, but they had access issues with certain tools. So location also is a problem. So sometimes when we're doing programs for certain parts of the country, there are certain things we are more flexible on. So for all our programs, particularly the ones that are synchronous learning programs, we require you to turn on your videos. But there's some parts of the country that the internet connection is so bad that, we have to reduce it and then try to use other flexible WhatsApp type of approaches in the conversation. So again, it's to also look at your target audience and what they need. When it's a platform or a channel or tool is working, you really would know, because people will adopt, they'll use it and all of that. So the point also is, how are you learning? How are you testing and learning from whatever option that you use and you make available? I know we didn't have to do this, but I know one of our friend organizations who does similar programs just had to use radio. They just had to go and get a bandwidth for a particular radio station, and that's how they were reaching out to their audiences, because internet, data, phone, text was just not working. So again, it's working around the flexibilities. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Are there any other questions? You can either post them through chats, raise your hand, unmute yourself. Otherwise, I'm going to hand over to Joshua and Confidence to finish this session.
All right. Thank you so much, Didrik and Adenike, and of course, Asha, who is actually not here now. If you have any other question, feel free to reach out to my colleague Confidence, and definitely we'll send a question to the facilitator, and of course, get the answers back to you through email. We've taken more than our time, and we really want to appreciate everyone. We do believe that you've had great time as much as we did. I had good time. And of course, apologies for those probably you didn't get to participate quite well in the breakout session. Yeah, so again, we want to appreciate you all. This session actually started in August 2020, where we actually deemed it fit to support our members and of course other partners within the ecosystem. And since August, we've been taking different topics, from fundraising to investment to partnership and several other topics. And this is actually the last session, which we're going to have for this series of workshops supported by ACT Foundation, who is actually one of our Andy members. Yeah, so we really want to appreciate you. And of course, like Confidence had mentioned at the start of this session, we have videos, the recordings and the notes from all the sessions are available on the portal on Andy website. And of course, our Confidence is actually going to share with everyone. For you, probably you missed any of the sessions, so that you can actually look back through the knowledge brief. And of course, you can always reach back to us or the facilitator of the session to get a better insight of the session. Yeah, again, like I said, we really appreciate you. And of course, we look forward to having you again in all our sessions. So definitely we have other programs for this year. We have some of our program, which we call Solution Cafe, which is actually going to bring people together, like a small group of people in terms of looking through certain challenges within the ecosystem, and of course have experts who is actually going to be providing idea on how you can navigate through those challenges. And of course, we have the gender project, which we have some of the people on this platform also going to be a part of the action lab, and a couple of other activities we're going to be having this year, which you'll be seeing from the email. For us not to take much of your time, I would really appreciate you, and we'll look forward to having you in upcoming sessions.